Hi, I'm Jim. Welcome to the Unbound Performance Podcast, where we explore the world of sports and performance mindset training.
And I'm Caroline. Each week we talk about the strategies, habits, and mental framework that help us to excel. Let's get into today's episode. Can we talk about the U.S. Open a little bit?
Yeah,
As I said that, I was like, that was the tournament, right?
Yes, that was.
I know.
Once more, the Athletic under their peak
I don't even subscribe.
banner or whatever. They had an article about JJ Spaun's improbable U.S. Open victory.
Yep.
It's improbable in many ways. It's his first major win. He's 34, not mistaken.
I said he was my age, but maybe
And
yeah, I'm just a little bit older.
just a shade.
Just a shade.
And yeah, the weather conditions were terrible. He had a terrible start to the first half of the course. And I heard at one point during the last day on the back nine, he had like a 1.8% chance of winning the tournament. Like,
what's the formula for that calculation?
I don't know, but they figure out the odds or
sure.
whatever. And he had like 5 bogeys on the front. He had 6 bogeys. All these weird numbers were like first guy to win whatever with 6 bogeys, which is 1 over par for those who aren't golfers. And I heard him talking on one podcast where they mentioned in this article, but like his 2-year-old daughter had awakened in the wee hours and was like throwing up, and so he's trying to
every parent's nightmare when you're not in the U.S. Open.
I know. On the last day.
Yeah.
It's on Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
But so they're trying to find drugstores that are open. Ultimately, they don't find one till like 7, and then his 5-year-old like jumps in the bed,
ready to go.
So he got some sleep, but it wasn't, like you would draw it up.
Sure.
But it was just a pretty remarkable sports story in terms of, if you wanted to, you could find all kinds of reasons why you could
that wasn't going to happen.
Mail it in. There was even at one point on the second hole on Sunday, the pins for U.S. Opens are like telephone poles. Mm-hmm. They do not bend. Yeah. Whereas all the other PGA events, they're very flexible. So he hits this tremendous shot that hits the pin. And instead of, maybe going in or just being really close to the hole, it bounces 53 yards away from the hole. So
unlike the one the Tiger hit, that'll hit the pin and just dropped in like an 08 or something like that.
So that was good. So it would just be so easy to say, well, I guess it's just not my day. And
he's not, like you said, he's never won a major.
Right.
He's by no means an underdog. Like, I think his name is well known in golf, but
recently. Yeah.
Recently, yes. Yeah. More recently, and also not more recently known, but probably not more recently known than expected to win the friggin' U.S. Open.
Especially after, a really rough start. He was all of a sudden, 5 shots back. But then they had a weather delay. It was about an hour and a half because of electricity in the air. It was raining like crazy.
It was,
one article I read, they said the course was even borderline unplayable.
When we that afternoon we had done something because Father's Day, and when we turned it on, the delay had just begun. So, and I'm watching, and I was like, that looks like, how do you even come back and play from this?
Right.
And then there was someone who had a shot that was right on the edge of, I don't know my golf terminology, the fairway and the grass, the thick grass, the rough. Okay, that is what it's called. I just didn't know if there's like a name for it before you get to like the sidewalk grass. And they were saying something like that might be a drop. That I guess depending on how much water, if it's sitting in like still water, you can. And I was like, well, does that count as a drop for him, or does he get? Apparently, that's a free drop. I didn't know that. But yeah, it just looked like a miserable condition to be playing one of the hardest courses.
Yeah, and that is like it is one of the hardest courses, and then under those conditions. But it was interesting, during that break where his team was with him, and they asked him like, you would have going into this, you would have traded being 4 shots back on the back 9, like for sure.
Yeah.
So let's look at it that way and
right.
kind of reshape our perspective on it. And that's just what he did, and played, pretty spectacular golf.
I think he's fun to watch. Like I think, there's some players that just don't look like nice people. Like he's someone you want to root for, whether you know him or not. He's got a nice smile. He looks like he's friendly, a good sportsman. Like you want to root for that guy.
I've never listened to him on podcasts or anything before, but he's such a nice.
Yeah, he just
person.
looks like a nice guy. Yeah.
I was instantly enamored.
I thought the background of his story too about, he was a walk on at San Diego
right.
State. I think he's my age. It says he started out in 2008.
Maybe
he's 36, not 34. Everyone, that doesn't not related to the story, but turned pro, had this crazy diabetes diagnosis. They thought it was type 1, that was type 2, which says it cost him his PGA Tour card.
Yes,
which I think when you have, and he says further in the article, which I think we'll get to because it was a different point in the the 4 things or whatever, the 4 lessons we can learn. That could have been an easy reason to hang it up. It could have been an easy reason to, life is hard. This got in the way. I did good enough. I'm gonna call it here. But he went from re-entering at 584th in the world to just 8th last year. That's a big ladder to climb. That's not just huge. Oh well, if I'm in the PGA, that's cool just to say I am. But to go up 566 rankings, that's a big, freaking huge, impossible ladder that he says at one point somewhere along the way, I just kept going 1 foot in front of the other.
Yep.
And that mindset to be able to say, and who knows, his mindset might have just been 1 foot in front of the other to keep on playing, not to necessarily climb up the ranks specifically, but it just sort of goes to show that if you have that mindset of 1 step at a time, 1 goal at a time, 1 tournament, 1 hole at a time, the tables can turn real quick.
Well, that was his the first lesson. Don't get distracted by what everyone else is doing.
Yep.
And he says, I just kept going 1 foot in front of the other.
He wasn't really groomed to be a professional golfer. Lots of these golfers go to the certain schools where they're groomed, or they have certain programs, or they don't go to school at all. They just have the golf thing with school on the side, whatever. And he just was a pretty normal.
It was pretty wild, though.
I
heard him talking on one podcast, and guess when his mother was 8 months, super pregnant, she liked to play golf, so she was out there
pregnant with
playing.
Him?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
And then
so he was groomed to be a golfer.
Yeah. And then his dad, they would play on the weekends, and his dad would have him sit in the stroller,
just watch him
and watch him play. On purpose, trying to get the image in his head or whatever. And then they set up a net in his garage, and he blasted shots into that, but it wasn't your typical, IMG Academy type.
Sure.
And then he's a walk-on in college, and he just kind of kept going. And it's so easy to have that conversation with yourself where you don't measure up, you're not as good, everybody else has all these advantages, edges over you.
Yep.
And he didn't do that. He just kept going, and pretty wild that ultimately winds up winning.
Well, this reminded me of that. I mean, not the same scenario, but the Andre Agassi story where he kind of repurposed his career.
Yep.
I don't think Spaun necessarily repurposed it as much, but this quote from him that says, "I just started saying my career is my career. Whatever happens, happens. I'm happy to have the career I've had, and that's taken a lot of pressure off my back." I think being able to sort of steer the other direction and not do the comparison game, and not say well, if I had gotten to go to being groomed as a golfer, if I had gotten to do this and that, He just said it is what it is. Like to me, what I read between the lines is I love the game of golf. I get to do this because I love it, and it is what it is, and I'm here. So let's be here. And I think that
being
mindset,
thankful thing is big deal.
Makes a big difference, doesn't it?
And then, so the second lesson: don't fear your nerves, harness them. And he says he likes being uncomfortable, which is not a natural response. But I heard him talk in another podcast about like choosing a response instead of just being reacting, and I think that's where all of this kind of approach that we're talking about here really helps kick that in and lets you play well.
Yeah. Well, this the end of that section. He said we can't get rid of nerve. Or I don't know if this is a quote from him or just the author of the article, but he says we can't get rid of nerves, but we can learn how to lean into them. And I think that's what we talk about all the time. Is even the most high level successful athlete, everyone's got nerves. You could never. I don't think you can ever eliminate nerves. It doesn't mean you're nervous about losing, but just nerves are just the anxieties of stepping into the game. But if you can, rather than let them control you, you have skills and tactics to be able to use them to your advantage. Like he learned to enjoy being uncomfortable. I think that's a huge, because I would say in most things, you're almost always going to be uncomfortable, especially in a sport where you have, I don't know how many people are playing in the U.S. Open. How many competitors are there?
Oh, to start, hundreds.
Okay, so you're. It's not like a tennis where you're playing against one person. Now I've realized tennis there might be a bracket type scenario, but it's not like you have one competitor. You have all these people.
Yep.
That at any given time, one of them could have been did what he did and kind of come through. So I think it's one of those ideas that you go into, especially this situation with tons of competitors, and like, hey, I'm just gonna play my game and do what I can do, and not let all of this other outside stuff, outside noise, impact me.
He said he uses the stress to heighten his focus, which is that's the goal. Like rather than be freaked out by being anxious or nervous or surprised by it somehow. Instead, he uses it to like hone his attention and shape it so that he can produce at a high level. Then the next one, the third, number 3, don't shy away from the moment. And that's another where we talked about all these things that went wrong. And even when he hits a great shot and it hits the pin and bounces 53 yards away, that was like a 2-stroke swing.
Right.
Winds up bogeying it instead of at least a birdie. Maybe could have been an eagle, 2 under. And instead, you just keep playing.
Yeah.
And keep competing. I just think that's why people do great things, because instead of letting circumstances create situations where they're just going to fade away, they keep coming.
Yep.
And the story is so amazing, especially when he doesn't have this long history of just cranking out major championship wins.
Yeah. Or even
as a pro
placing anywhere. Like, just not.
Well, and then heck, at the Players Championship, he kind of gagged it and lost to Rory.
Yeah.
Not just a couple 3 months ago. So it could have been easy to let that stuff seep into his memory as well.
Yeah.
But he didn't. And instead, he says he dug deep and didn't shy away from the moment. He embraced it.
Yeah, I mean, in that rain delay too.
Oh, that was big. Yeah,
saying he decided they were going to dig deep and battle back from that rough start. He said, "I'm not trying to shy away from the moment." Other golfers, it's like icing the free throw shooter or icing
Yep.
I think that very well could have been an icing moment where you either couldn't return after that break, or you could do what he did, which was let's flip the script and use this as momentum to try to sort of change what happened thus far, and that's definitely what he did.
Yeah, he talked about how he definitely kind of reset, took a breath, paused, and kind of pulled up off, what was really a rough start.
Yeah.
And then talks about finding some hope in serendipity. he referenced the movie Wimbledon about a aging tennis player who thought about retiring, but instead hung in there and wins Wimbledon. That's literally, he was thinking about retiring not too long ago, and now here he is. And the impact of winning something like this. I mean, he's an automatic qualifier in the U.S. Open, I think, for the next 10 years.
Oh wow!
And then every other major.
So it's not just a win; it's a career. It's a career move.
Yeah, like the next 5 years. Yeah, it has a huge impact on your life when you win one of those.
Financially
things.
as well, I think.
Yeah, well, the payday was pretty huge.
Not too shabby on that one.
But
yeah, in that serendipity, section, he said it's a cool reminder that inspiration can come from anywhere and it can completely change your attitude. And I think, I don't know if he specifically said that the movie Wimbledon is what made him decide to stick around, but like kind of looking back, like that was a real comparison of a parallel situation where you could have hung it up. You could have just said, well, this is just how it's going to go. But turns out it's a good thing you hung around.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, golf is one of those sports where you just never know. And except for that insane run Tiger Woods had. Sure. Where.
Insane.
You were you would literally hear. I remember watching the TV show The Sports Reporters on ESPN, and they would be like, all right, who do you have, Tiger or the field? Which I'd never heard golf talked about like that before.
There wasn't like some other person that maybe it was like
him
or anyone
but it was
else.
real.
Yeah, it was.
And so apart from that, all these guys are good.
Yep.
And anybody, like,
at any time,
can catch lightning in a 4-day week and come out of nowhere and win. So, and that's literally what happened here in a life-changing
absolutely
situation. So it was, under all these crazy conditions where it's just so easy to find reasons to kind of give
up a little bit. Yeah. Just keep charging forward.
He didn't do that. Yeah. And I just think it's a great example, great story. One of the crazy, most unforgettable sports stories of the year.
Yep.
No doubt. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unbound Performance Podcast.
Your support helps us continue to build our community. If you're enjoying this content, please like, subscribe, and share.